Jean Crowder came in. She was the Aboriginal Affairs critic for my town, Nanaimo. She's my MP, right? Although maybe she isn't because I don't recognize Canada anymore, but anyway. Jean Crowder came in and I asked her, my partner Carol and I were both there, and Carol was taking notes, and I said to Jean, would the NDP support a motion in the House of Commons to have these graves investigated? She said no. And I said, why? She said, not at this time, because we'd have to consult the right people. And I said, well, who are the right people, Jean? And she didn't say. But it's funny, 2 months later, the Tory government comes out because they were under that pressure. They knew they had to address it. And now, within 2 months of Jim Preda saying that, he had been bumped to another portfolio. Gary Morasti had been offered a job at Camco, which was a big uranium company in Saskatchewan that had to spruce up their image because of their dumping shit on their Aboriginal reserves. He was hired by them. And Jose Barrera, who was the Ottawa Sun reporter who had broken the whole story, he was bumped. So, you know, the three people kind of that were involved in pushing that were suddenly removed, and in its place came in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Now, the TRC was set up by an order in council, again, not debated in Parliament, just like the Indian Act or any of these other things. The Prime Minister's office had to approve all the appointments to the TRC commissioners, 3 commissioners, nominated including by the churches. Okay, so I say this is like getting Clifford Olson, the serial killer, to name the jury, to name the judge, to get to have lunch with him, to offer money in compensation to his victims' families, and then call that Truth and Reconciliation. Well, as I said on CTV once, we wouldn't allow that with one serial killer. The churches were far more prolific killers than Clifford Olson. He killed 9 kids, they killed 50,000. They've gotten away with that. So, no, I'm pretty disgusted with the whole TRC and the way it's set up, and the way the media slavishly kind of says, you know, uncritically says that this is this attempt modeled on South Africa, which is total horseshit. I mean, if you read what happened in South Africa, their founding document, and the South African TRC says, this process will not constitute a means by which perpetrators can achieve immunity. Boom. No, you know, you can have immunity when you testify, but it doesn't mean you're off the hook here. The entire process of the TRC is based on a granting of immunity, an indemnification process to the churches and government. And you know that if you're a survivor, you have to sign a form, and I've got it here in my book, that says, I absolve. I mean, they list the religious organizations that raped and murdered everybody, and says, by accepting this money, I release Canada and these churches from all obligation, responsibility, and liability. That's cheap, isn't it? Pay a bit of money and you get away with mass murder. And that's what's going on. Now, the TRC's founded on that assumption. Just like in Ireland, they sent people in Ireland in 2004 in Canada, and I found this out when I was in Dublin by a member of the Dáil, the Irish Parliament. I was visiting relatives in the north, and I went down, and this guy said, well, you know, we went over and studied the way you were handling your survivors, and we did the same thing here in Ireland. The church and the government issued a thing called the Ryan Report by Judge Ryan that removed all the names, and the church is not prosecuted by it, right? In return, they're going to give a bit of money out. Well, I mean, this is outrageous, really. And I'm just sickened, and I'm waiting for the outrage here, because it's like, if Canadians really knew what was going on in their name, you know, I believe that people would just be up in arms. So this is why, and I see it building. I see, you know, these meetings get bigger every time I speak. And I was at a Catholic high school 2 days ago, and these Catholic kids were all on board, let me tell you. You know, and people are really waking up, so I'm hopeful. Because actually, after I got defrocked, delisted, whatever you're calling it, called liberated, I found out from a friend who actually had a friend working in the General Counsel office. She said, tell Kevin he's caused more stir in this building than anybody in history, and there's a whole full-time 2 lawyers working on Kevin Annett. And one of the things they've ordered is any clergyman in any United Church in Canada is ordered that if my name comes up, or there's protesters, or anything to do with residential schools, they're immediately not supposed to talk to the people about it, but to forward the information to the national office, and especially the Public Relations Department. Marie-France Denis, who runs it, and Jamie Scott, who is the person responsible for Indian residential school stuff. So it's tightly controlled from the center, even if people want to, any of there is sympathetic clergy, I mean, and people in pews who want to do the right thing. But all they're getting spoon-fed the church's line about me, which is, and if you read their website, it's hilarious. They didn't print any of the 38 letters of support for me at my defrocking, but they printed 4 letters that they solicited during the trial, which you're not supposed to do under the rules of evidence. The lawyer went out and got these letters from 4 church officials who thought I was, nasty guy, and so it's like, that's all you're getting as a church member, just like with the residential schools. You're being fed the line that this guy's crazy, this affected his congregation, and Native people hate him. Right, and he uses their testimonies without their permission. That's another one you'll see. I mean, that came out of the RCMP Division headquarters in Vancouver. We know Peter Ronnegut, he admitted that, like with the Gustafson Lake stuff, his job was to discredit anyone working against the government in the residential schools. I mean, the evidence is, vast about this stuff. And so, I forget your question now. Oh, United Church. Yeah, I mean, if you know congregations, I'd be happy to come and speak anytime. I often say to people, I've never been sued, and that tells you a lot. Because if I was somebody who was being wrongfully defamed, and I had evidence to disprove this guy, the first thing I'd do is sue his ass and get him into court. Hasn't happened in 15, 18 years. And that tells you a lot. Silence is consent under the law. The church has never disputed any of this under the law. And secondly, the level of harassment goes from everything from, okay, bullets on my doorstep. I've had when I was living on Salt Spring Island, there was a dead deer on our back porch with a bullet through the head. Death threats, physical assaults. Most recent one when we published some articles on child trafficking today on the West Coast. Just, I mean, you name it. If I had an hour, I couldn't describe it all. But yeah. No, I mean, who knows? Who knows? They don't wear name tags.
Disappearing as well.
Sorry?
Native people have been disappearing that have not given information over the years. All of them.
Numerous times. As a matter of fact, the most recent one was William Coombs, who died in hospital suddenly. Harry Nahani, William Coombs, Bingo Dawson. I mean, there's a whole list we can make of people who died in hospital or on the streets of violence. William claimed that he saw the Queen of England and Prince Philip take 10 kids from the Kamloops Catholic School in 1964 in October. And we know the Queen was in Canada then, I checked the records. And the kids were never seen again. And he was going to come to London and testify at our tribunal and get that on the record in September. He was in good condition. He had been a bad drinker his whole life, ever since the residential school where he was badly tortured. But he had been recovering. I saw him 2 days before I left for Europe, and he was doing well. And I was told that he was committed to a hospital, St. Paul's Hospital, run by the Catholic Church, and he died in there the next morning. And I can't get an answer out of the coroner. Just like with Bingo, there's no answer right away. They need time to get their ducks in order, but, happens. Yep.
Have you found that your message has changed now that you're no longer on the radio for Remote West?
The message?
Like you were on the radio and then you were let go.
Yeah.
And the power of your message, is it gone in different ways or has it changed?
It's beginning, yeah, very much, I would say. It's kind of a lot to get into right now, but it's definitely moving more in the direction of understanding the commonality we all have in this struggle and how it's fundamental. It's about, for me, 3 issues. It's about the survival of the earth and the land, children, and our sovereignty and rights, as we're kind of, and they're all related because I believe that the people who claim to run the system aren't actually in charge, that the system is out of control and they know it. And they have to create a feigned impression that they're in charge. But the reality, and I'm not saying there isn't elites conspiring and doing all sorts of shit, but the reality is, as things get worse, as people are waking up more, the fear has to be imposed more. And they perfected the residential schools. They know how to do this very well. And like the canaries in the mine shaft, the Indians were tried out first. The swine flu vaccine was tried out on the people in Housat in Canada, because they can do that under Section 76 of the Indian Act when you're on reserve. They can force medical treatment on you. And so we're all in the same boat more and more. And that's why there's tremendous potential here, because we now have many allies. It isn't just about doing the right thing by Native people, it's about all of us.
Have you seen Welcome to the Reservation by Bussell? Really good.
Yeah.
Are some of them just growing up with, you know, not ignorant, but just not aware because of the parents fearing how the children are going to feel? Or is there a lot of knowledge being given to the children so that they know what's happening to protect themselves?
Do you mean Aboriginal children?
Yes, yes.
I would want people in the room who know that better to answer that. I do know that I do the native families I work with. To give you one example, a couple of months before I left, in the Sweetgrass Center, where, well, it's renamed now, but anyway, we're working there, and a native woman came in. She hadn't seen her four kids in 3 months, including a kid she was still breastfeeding. And that's because there had been a rumor from somebody that she was mistreating her kids, which wasn't true. But, and I know the woman well, they came and just took the kids, which they couldn't do with a white woman. And that thing is the norm in the native world, the loss of children that way. Now, in that condition of warfare, when you're under attack, most of the people I work with, they're just struggling every day to survive, to keep their heads above water, and all of my energy goes into helping them do that. And the way we do it is, that's a job too big for one person or one group. We all have to do that. We all have to take responsibility for the most vulnerable, especially the children, because look, they're targeted. We know the child trafficking networks that operate. One of the guys in our network worked out of Thailand until they expelled him, and he knows that the link between Bangkok and Vancouver and the child trafficking. We've documented all that. And that's one of the reasons I was attacked recently, because we began to name some of the actors involved in that. So we all have to take that responsibility. It's community policing we need to do. But that's...
But is there a lot of things being done to help the children? Like, is there a lot of changes, or does it seem that is it like it's continuing the same road?
Generally, I'd say no, and it's getting worse. And the people who are sincere trying to work in the system, they keep saying the same thing. We have less and less money. We have less and less time to go after the people who we know are responsible. We just can't do anything. It's being deliberately, you know.
Because they're not getting support. Or is it
at any level.
Resources and stuff? Because
it's about money. It's about the lack of care or concern by people. You know, we are an Irish guy in Dublin, one of my relatives said a brilliant thing, and he said, we're traumatized. In a hierarchical society, you have to traumatize the children, because that's the only way you're going to get wage slaves. That's the only way you're going to get people on the assembly line, and it could be good taxpayers. If you make them, and the way Cornelius put it was, he said, we learn not to have empathy for ourselves. And to me that was brilliant, because if you don't have empathy for yourself at a young age, what you've been through, how can you have empathy for anybody else? So he said, you can't do this work unless you deal with your own issues. And it's interesting, Carol Martin, who's a Native woman I work with, said the trouble with the Native chiefs now in the big government-funded organizations, they've never dealt with their own issues. So they can be easily manipulated and their buttons can be pressed and they can be controlled. We have to start in that way, and so the way to really help the kids is to take responsibility in our own lives first, I think. If you know what we can talk about that more, I don't want to go on here. But, and I said, you don't have to hate your parents, it was a law. They had no control. And I remember an 82-year-old woman got up and she started crying. We took the document and we burned it in the Longhouse fire. And as it burned, you could just feel this release happening. You know, you can put the anger where it's deserved now. You don't have to hate and fight one another anymore. Very important step. And this is the kind of way that this film has had that impact. So I really encourage everyone to realize the power in our hands when we document and make our own film and get it up on YouTube. We have the technology now, we can all do that. And that's what I meant about being our own media. We have to document everything, get it out there. And it has a much greater impact on our numbers or what we originally thought we could do. So it's won 3 awards at the Aboriginal Film Festival in Edmonton last year, and New York and Los Angeles Independent Film Fests. And it was broadcast in Europe last August to 10 million people over German and Swiss television. So that's one of the reasons I think the Canadian government is under a lot of pressure now, because people all over the world now know this story. So I'm going to show the first 15 minutes and then we'll just carry on our dialogue here. When God is on our side, we can commit any crime. We're absolved individually from that crime by believing that we have a higher sanction. And that's the danger of religion, and that it allows people to do that. It allows them to kill without a shred of conscience.